Hello, my name is Diana. I am going to give you my testimony and tell you what God has done for me. When I was 21 years old, I was running kind of aimlessly. I had a lot of hurt and pain and rebellion, and I was, doing what most teenagers, young adults are doing, drinking and just partying and just running from everything to try to get rid of the pain that was inside. And on June 1st of 1986, I found myself in a hospital. I woke up and I really wasn't coherent because I had injured so many different parts of my body. There was a lot of morphine running through my veins. I had crashed my car, and by the by an eyewitness, I was told that my car had gone from its side of the road and crossed over, and I was driving about 75 miles per hour on a two-lane, 35-mile-an-hour stretch of road, and I crossed over the lane and hit a telephone pole, and the telephone pole had sheet metal on it, pretty thick, about this high, that ripped the first layer of my door off of the car, and the car was going so fast that it spun around and it hit a concrete porch. And the eyewitness said that the car flew in the air about 10 times, and I had flown out of the car, and then the car landed on top of me, and just my legs were hanging out from under the car. And part of what had happened that night is I was working, and I got off work, and I was supposed to meet my then boyfriend around 10 o'clock, and I ended up going other places and doing other things. And when I finally showed up to meet him, he was very concerned about me and had run out of the place where I was to meet him. And before I was barely out of the car, he walked up to me and he took the keys from me. And that angered me. There was a lot of anger inside of me that had been brewing for several years. And I looked him square in the eyes and put my hands on the keys and said, "No one tells me what to do." Took the keys, jumped in my car, and that's when I sped off down this roadway going 75 miles an hour. And so once I was pinned under the car, he had gone back inside the building where he was at and got his keys and got in his car and then followed me. So he was the one to find me under my car, and with his adrenaline and all that had happened, he lifted the car off of me and pulled me aside because he was afraid the car was going to catch on fire and something worse would have happened. Needless to say, I was taken to a hospital, and he sat outside the hospital room, and the doctor came out and said she will not make it through the night because I was internally bleeding so bad. But miraculously, the first of many miracles, God really had his hand on me, and somehow the bleeding, by way of miracle, had stopped. They then flew me out of this smaller hospital into a larger hospital, and there I was treated in my spine. I had broke my spine, actually severed it in two spots at the thoracic third and fourth level. They said it was complete, and when such a thing happens, there's no hope of walking again because it just kind of cuts like the telephone wire, and the connection from the brain to the nerve telling the limbs to move no longer, um, the connection no longer goes through. So I was then paralyzed from right about this point to my feet. I also had a pelvic fracture, a ruptured spleen. I broke my arm in two places, and my head was gashed very badly. All the skin was showing. There's actually asphalt still in my head from the roadway. But after going through all those different surgeries and whatnot, I was in the hospital intensive care for a couple of weeks, and then um, I was in rehab for the next 4 weeks, and I was a sight to see. I had a cast from my shoulder to my wrist and couldn't move my legs. So once again, needless to say, I couldn't really do much for myself, but I had to really begin thinking about what had transpired in my life and what truly I was running from, because no longer could I really run anymore. I had to really deal with not only the present but the past. I had to, they took you into the psychiatrist and want to put you on antidepressants, but I said, whoa, let's talk about what has happened up until this point, opposed to they really wanted to set you up for living your life in a wheelchair, and it was my desire to really look at what had brought me to that point. And so I got out of rehab, like I said, about 4 months later, and I continued to drink. I continued to run my course and run my path, and then 7 years later, I remember it like it was yesterday, I was just sitting with my bottle of wine and I was alone, and I just said, God, I am going to find you, as if he was lost. But he wasn't lost, I was. And sure enough, I found a church and just found the Heavenly Father that I knew as a child. The one thing I remember from church more than anything that was that Jesus loved me. And that love just stayed in my heart. So he has changed my life drastically. After spending and learning of God for a couple of years, one day, kind of out of the blue, because I was not even praying for God to heal me, but he spoke to my heart, and I was really concerned about people, and God had given me sobriety, which was peace. And I find it to be the greatest gift of all. Some people call it peace. I call it sobriety, because no longer did I need a drink or a boyfriend or any other vice. I just needed God. I needed the sobriety. I needed the peace that he gave me. One day I was really concerned for people in church, and I came out of church crying. And I said to the Lord, I said to him, I said, I want people to know that I'd rather sit with you than walk without you. And he said, write a book and I'm going to heal you. And I was like, wow. And so at that point, just a lot of things had changed, because I figured, God didn't put me in the wheelchair. I had done something really crazy. I was drinking, I was angry. I think I failed to mention that that night, indeed, I was drinking. I had way too much to drink, and then I got angry with the boyfriend situation, and on top of that, the anger kind of took over, and rage, I guess, is a better word. And God has healed me of anger. God has healed me of many things. And now I live my life for him. And he gave me that promise of healing, but it's not the healing that I run after God for. I run after God because his ways, it says in his word that his ways are not our ways, but he makes his ways known to me, and then what he's thinking becomes what I'm thinking. If you look at the Bible, I look at it as the basic instruction before leaving earth. He doesn't give us the way to live for his sake. He gives it to us for our sake. So I share my testimony with you today in hopes that you will be encouraged, because life is not easy, and life certainly is not easy in a wheelchair, but every day he gives me strength, he gives me joy, and he has given me sobriety and peace.